My name is Scarlett Hayes. I'm 34 years old, and until about 3 weeks ago, I believed that if you built your life carefully enough, nothing really collapsed without warning. Not overnight, not without signs. I work in automotive sales and management in Phoenix. My days are structured, predictable. I start early, spend most of my time between our dealership locations, managing operations, solving problems that can actually be solved if you have the right information. I like that kind of control. And for a long time, I thought my relationship reflected that. Ethan Cole is 29, charismatic in a way that feels effortless, the kind of man who understands how he's being perceived in real time and adjusts accordingly. He works in marketing for a fitness brand, and everything about him revolves around presentation, image, lifestyle, how things look from the outside. We had been together for a little over a year. We didn't live together, but he stayed at my place 3 or 4 nights a week, enough to feel integrated, not enough to feel permanent. When we met, I was driving a 2010 Honda Accord. Clean, maintained, reliable. I kept it because it works. Because I don't replace things just to prove something to someone else. Ethan noticed it immediately, of course. At first, it was just small comments, harmless on the surface. He'd mention what his friends' girlfriends drove, talk about how image matters when you're building a future. He never said anything directly harsh. Not at the beginning. I didn't argue, I just listened. And I remembered. Last Friday, we met a few of his co-workers for drinks after work. We left together in my Honda. As soon as he got into the passenger seat, he laughed. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough. "You still drive this?" he said, running his hand along the dashboard like he was inspecting something outdated. "I mean, it's clean, but wow, I didn't expect this." His tone wasn't curious. It was amused. And his co-workers were standing close enough to hear. That detail mattered more than anything else. I didn't respond right away. I just started the car and drove. I've learned that people reveal more when you give them space. At the bar, it came up again. One of his coworkers asked what I did. Before I could answer, Ethan smiled and said, "She works at a dealership, but apparently doesn't believe in employee discounts." He laughed like it was a joke. I felt something shift. Not sharp, not immediate, just a quiet recalibration. "I manage operations," I said evenly. The coworker nodded. Conversation moved on. But Ethan didn't let it go. He leaned closer, his voice softer this time, but not softer in intent. "Maybe if you closed a few more deals," he said, "you could upgrade to something less depressing." That was the second time in under an hour. Not teasing. Positioning. I didn't react emotionally. I never do in public. "My car works fine," I told him. "I have other priorities." He rolled his eyes slightly, like I'd missed something obvious. "Priorities are fine," he said, "but first impressions matter." I watched him after that. Not what he said, but what he chose to engage with. He was more animated when talking about other men's jobs, more attentive when status entered the conversation. At one point, he asked another coworker's boyfriend what he drove. "A new BMW," the man said. Ethan smiled, approved. He didn't look at me when he did it. That was the moment I understood something I hadn't fully named before. This wasn't about the car. It was about how he categorized people, and I had just been placed somewhere, lower than he expected. On the drive back to my apartment, he said he was just trying to motivate me. Motivate. The word stayed with me longer than the comments themselves. I had never given him any reason to believe I lacked ambition. He had never asked deeper questions about my work, never shown interest beyond surface-level curiosity. And yet, he felt comfortable correcting me, improving me, as if I needed it. When we got inside, he didn't drop it. "I just can't picture pulling up to events like that long term," he said casually, setting his keys down. "Do you plan to upgrade soon?" That was it. Not the car. The implication. I looked at him for a moment, really looked this time. "What do you mean by long term?" I asked. He hesitated for half a second, just enough to choose his wording. "I want a partner who reflects the lifestyle I'm building," he said. "Someone aligned." Aligned. Upgrade came up again. Not about the car this time. About me. I felt something settle into place then. Not anger, not even disappointment. Clarity. "I'm comfortable with my life," I said, "and my decisions." He shrugged like comfort was a flaw. "That's what keeps people average," he said. Casual. Like it was a fact. I didn't argue after that. There wasn't anything to debate. "I don't appreciate being talked down to," I told him, "especially not in front of other people." He tilted his head slightly, almost amused. "If you feel insecure about a car," he said, "that's your issue." And that was enough. I didn't raise my voice, didn't explain further. "This isn't going to work," I said. "You should get your things." He blinked, caught off guard. Wait, seriously, he said. You're ending this over a joke? I shook my head once. I'm ending it because of how you think about people. That changed his tone immediately. He softened, backtracked. I was just pushing you, he said, trying to help you level up. I'm not looking for someone who evaluates me like that, I replied. He kept talking while packing a small overnight bag, saying I was overreacting, that I was taking it too seriously. I didn't engage. When he was done, I walked him to the door. I'll drop off the rest of your things, I said. He left irritated, not upset. That distinction mattered. After the door closed, I sat down and replayed everything. Not the words, the pattern. Public belittling, framing it as motivation, dismissing my boundary as insecurity. It wasn't one moment. It was a system. And once I saw it clearly, there was nothing left to reconsider. The next morning, I went to work like nothing had happened. That's always been my default setting. Structure doesn't pause for personal decisions. If anything, it reinforces them. I arrived at the main dealership a little before 8, same as usual. The lot was already active. Sales staff walking inventory, service bay doors open, the low hum of routine settling into place. Predictable, controlled. I checked in with the sales managers, reviewed weekend numbers, adjusted a few projections. On the surface, everything moved exactly as it should. Underneath, there was a quiet sense of confirmation. Not regret, not doubt. Just clarity, settling deeper. For context, I own 3 dealership locations across the city. I don't usually say that out loud. When people ask what I do, I keep it simple. Automotive management, operations, enough truth to answer the question without inviting a different kind of attention. It filters things. It always has. Ethan never pushed past that surface. He never asked. Around 10 that morning, my operations manager forwarded me an email from HR. Subject line, receptionist candidates, walk-in interviews today. We had an open position at the primary showroom. Entry level, structured hours, the kind of role that requires consistency more than ambition. I skimmed the list of names, and then I stopped. Ethan Cole. For a moment, I thought it was coincidence. Same name, different person. But when I opened the attached resume, there was no ambiguity. It was him. Updated, reformatted, clean. Under previous employment, he listed his marketing role, added a line about exploring opportunities in automotive to broaden his experience. I leaned back in my chair and looked at the screen a little longer than necessary. Less than 12 hours. We had ended things less than 12 hours ago. He hadn't mentioned being unhappy with his job, hadn't expressed interest in this industry beyond surface-level comments. And now, he was applying to work at my dealership, not referencing me. Not acknowledging any connection. Just walking in and asking if we were hiring. I called HR. How did he apply? I asked. He came in when we opened, they said. Asked if we had any openings. Filled out the paperwork on site. No hesitation in their voice. To them, he was just another candidate. That detail mattered. I didn't tell them to cancel the interview. There was no reason to interfere with the process. If he wanted a receptionist position, he was free to apply like anyone else. But I did make one decision. I would sit in on the final round, not to embarrass him, not to create a moment, just to observe. By early afternoon, curiosity had replaced any lingering surprise, not about why he applied, but about what he thought my role actually was. His interview was scheduled for 2:30. I stayed in my office overlooking the showroom floor and asked HR to conduct the first round without mentioning me. I wanted to see how he presented himself when he believed I was just another employee somewhere in the building. From the glass wall, I had a clear view of the reception desk and the small conference room where interviews were held. He arrived 10 minutes early. That in itself was not unusual. What was everything else? He was dressed differently, more conservative than I had ever seen him. Neutral blouse replaced with a button-down shirt, sleeves neatly pressed, dark slacks, hair styled simply. No statement pieces, no visible effort to stand out. Contained. Deliberate. I watched him approach the receptionist. Polite smile, steady tone, no edge, no trace of the dismissiveness from the night before. It was a different version of him. Not fake, exactly. Just selectively presented. HR summarized the first round for me afterward. He comes across adaptable, they said. Says he's looking for long-term stability. Wants to grow within a company structure. Stability. That word stayed with me. Less than 24 hours earlier, he had dismissed my choices as average. Now he was positioning himself as someone who valued consistency. He also mentioned he respects businesses with strong leadership, HR added. I paused slightly at that. Strong leadership. Interesting. Move him to final, I said. Normally, that would be handled by one of my general managers. This time, I decided otherwise. I'll take the last round, I told them. They didn't question it. At 3:15, HR walked him toward the executive offices. He was looking at his phone as he walked, relaxed, focused, probably expecting to meet a mid-level director, someone he could impress with the same polished version of himself he had just presented. When he stepped into my office and looked up, everything changed. It wasn't dramatic. No visible shock, no exaggerated reaction. Just a pause, a fraction of a second too long. His eyes moved from me to the nameplate on my desk, and back to me again. Processing. Recalculating. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. I gestured toward the chair across from me. Have a seat, I said. My tone was the same one I use with any candidate. Neutral, professional, controlled. He stayed standing for just a moment longer than necessary. I didn't realize this was your office, he said. I know, I replied. He glanced around. Subtle, but not subtle enough to hide the shift. Framed certifications on the wall. Performance charts. The layout of the office itself. Context was filling in. Quickly. He sat down. Carefully. I picked up his resume like it was any other document. No hesitation. No acknowledgement of anything outside the room. Tell me why you're interested in this position, I said. His answer came quickly. Prepared. I'm looking to transition into the automotive space, he said. I think starting at the front desk would give me a strong foundation. I'm open to learning from the ground up. Yesterday, he had implied the industry didn't justify my car. Now it was a strategic opportunity. I nodded once. What do you know about our company? I asked. A brief pause. He mentioned the main showroom. Surface-level details. Nothing beyond what someone could observe walking in. How many locations do you think we operate? I asked. He hesitated. I assumed just this one. I see, I said. I kept my tone even. We have 3 locations across the city, just over 80 employees. No emphasis, no edge, just information. His posture shifted slightly, hands folding together, shoulders tightening just enough to notice. I didn't realize you were the owner, he said. Most people don't, I replied. That's intentional. Silence settled between us for a moment. Not uncomfortable, just revealing. Then he exhaled lightly. About last night, he said, his voice softer now. I didn't mean it the way it came out. There it was. The recalibration. I held his gaze. What concerns me isn't how it came out, I said. It's the criteria behind it. He shifted again, searching for a different angle. It was just teasing, he said. I was surprised, that's all. Surprised by what? I asked. That someone in your position would... He trailed off, then corrected himself. Drive something modest. That was the first time he acknowledged there was a position to begin with. I nodded once. The car serves its purpose, I said. It's been paid off for years. I let that sit for a second. Then I asked the question that mattered. Do you believe someone's vehicle determines their value? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned back slightly, choosing his words. I think perception matters, he said. In dating, in business, it's about alignment. Alignment. The same word from the night before. Be specific, I said. If someone drives an older car, what does that signal to you? He shifted in his chair. A small movement, but telling. It can signal, he paused, a lack of ambition. There it was, unchanged, just more carefully phrased. I watched him for a moment. Then I said calmly, less than 24 hours ago you described my car as embarrassing. He looked down briefly. I didn't know the full picture, he said. And that was the moment everything clarified completely. I leaned back slightly in my chair. If you still believed I was just a mid-level employee driving that same car, I asked, would you still be sitting here trying to explain it? He didn't answer. Not yes. Not no. Just silence. Then, that's not fair, he said. I held his gaze. It's directly relevant. His composure shifted again. Not gone, but thinning. He looked down at the table for a second like he was buying himself time. Not to think, to choose. There's a difference. I think relationships require growth, he said finally. I push the people I'm with to level up. The phrasing was familiar, refined, but not different. I nodded slightly, as if I were evaluating a candidate instead of listening to someone I had shared a year of my life with. And you believe that push should happen publicly? I asked. His jaw tightened, just enough to notice. That wasn't my intention, he said. It just came out wrong. I didn't interrupt him. People will often correct themselves if you let silence sit long enough. I was thinking about image, he continued. How things look long-term. That matters. Especially when you're building something with someone. Yesterday, building something had meant upgrading me. Today, it meant reframing the same idea in more acceptable language. I picked up a pen and made a small note on the evaluation sheet. Not for HR, for myself. Image matters, I repeated, and how someone is perceived reflects their value. That's not what I said, he replied quickly. It's what you implied. Another pause. Longer this time. He shifted forward slightly, elbows resting on his knees. I made a mistake, he said, quieter now. I overstepped. That was the first direct acknowledgement. Clean, simple, no deflection. I nodded once. Then I closed the folder in front of me. We're not going to discuss our relationship further in a hiring context, I said. This stays professional. He blinked slightly, like he wasn't sure if that helped him or hurt him. Probably both. I shifted my tone, not softer, just more structured. Let's talk about the role, I continued. Reception requires consistency. You're the first point of contact for clients. You set the tone for the entire experience. He nodded, posture straightening again, back into performance mode. How do you handle difficult customers? I asked. His answer came quickly. Stay calm, represent the brand, focus on solutions instead of reacting emotionally. Rehearsed, clean, and not entirely inaccurate. Yesterday, representing himself had included mocking someone he thought had less. I didn't say that out loud. I just wrote another note. He watched my pen for a second longer than necessary. Then he asked the question I knew was coming. Will our personal history affect the decision? There it was. Not concern. Calculation. I set the pen down. The company has policies around personal relationships, I said. Hiring a recent ex into a front-facing role under executive oversight creates complications. I can be professional, he said quickly. I don't doubt that, I replied. But professionalism also includes avoiding situations that compromise perception internally. He leaned back, arms crossing over his chest. A subtle shift. Defensive now. So this is retaliation, he said. His tone wasn't aggressive, but it wasn't neutral anymore either. I met his gaze evenly. Retaliation would be inventing performance issues, I said. This is a structural decision. He exhaled sharply through his nose. We broke up less than a day ago, I continued. That alone removes any sense of neutrality from this situation. His composure slipped a little more. Not fully, but enough. I didn't know you were this sensitive, he said. There it was again. Same pattern. Different setting. I tilted my head slightly. This isn't about sensitivity, I said. It's about judgment and alignment. The same words he had used. Reframed. Grounded. Real. Silence settled again. He didn't fill it this time. That told me more than anything he could have said. I picked up the folder, held it for a second, then set it aside. I won't be moving forward with your application, I said. Direct. Final. No hesitation. He stood up almost immediately. Not abruptly, but with purpose. The interview was over. There was nothing left to perform. So this is it? He asked. That's your decision? It is, I said. His expression shifted again. Not confusion this time. Something closer to frustration. If I had known the full picture, he said, I wouldn't have said what I said. I stood as well, not to match him, but to close the distance of the conversation. That's exactly the issue, I replied. He frowned slightly. Respect shouldn't be conditional on information you don't have, I continued. It should be consistent. He shook his head, a small, dismissive motion. That's not how the real world works, he said. People care about status. Some do, I said. You're free to date someone who prioritizes that. I let the next sentence land without raising my voice. I'm not adjusting my life to qualify for someone else's criteria. He stared at me for a second. Longer this time. No immediate response. Then, why didn't you tell me, he asked. About the company? There it was. Not curiosity. Not admiration. Just repositioning. I prefer to see how people treat me without extra context, I said. It simplifies things. His jaw tightened again. You made me look stupid, he muttered. I held his gaze. No, I said calmly. You made assumptions. That landed harder than anything else I had said. I could see it in the way his shoulders stiffened. The way he looked away for just a second. There was nothing left to unpack. No more angles to try. No more versions of himself to present. The conversation had reached its natural conclusion. I walked toward the door of the office and opened it. He followed, quieter now. Less composed. Less certain. As we stepped into the hallway, the dealership moved around us like it always did. Phones ringing, conversations overlapping, sales staff guiding clients across the showroom floor. Normal. Uninterrupted. No one paid attention to us. And that was intentional. At the end of the corridor, near the entrance to the executive wing, he stopped. One more thing, he said. I turned slightly. I could have been supportive, he added, if I had known. There it was. The final attempt. I met his eyes. I'm looking for someone who is supportive before they know, I said. No edge, no emphasis, just truth. He didn't respond, didn't argue, just nodded once, barely, and turned toward the main showroom, walking past the reception desk, the same one he had hoped to sit behind. I watched him for a second longer than necessary, not because I was reconsidering, but because I was confirming. Then I turned back toward my office, closed the door, and moved on to the next interview. The rest of the afternoon continued like nothing unusual had happened, because from a business standpoint, nothing had. I finished the remaining interviews, reviewed the notes with HR, and approved a different candidate for the receptionist role. Someone qualified, neutral, uncomplicated. That part was easy. It always is when you remove emotion from the equation. By the time I left their dealership that evening, the sun was already low, casting long shadows across the lot. I walked past rows of cars, new models, polished finishes, everything designed to signal something to someone. And then I got into my 2010 Honda. The engine started the same way it always had. No hesitation, no performance, just function. On the drive home, I thought about how quickly everything had shifted. Not externally. Nothing in my life had changed in any visible way. But internally, something had settled. Not anger, not regret, just confirmation. When I got back to my apartment, the space felt exactly the same. His absence didn't leave a gap. It removed noise. That distinction mattered. Later that evening, my phone buzzed once. A message from Ethan. I think we should talk when things aren't so heated. I stared at the screen for a few seconds. There was no heat. That was the part he still didn't understand. My decision hadn't come from emotion. It came from information. I don't think there is anything left to clarify, I replied. But I wish you well. I muted the conversation after that. Not out of avoidance. Just completion. The following week, I coordinated returning the rest of his belongings. No drawn-out exchange, no second meeting. I packed everything carefully, labeled the box, and arranged to leave it with the front desk of his building. Sent a brief message with the time and location. Efficient, clean, final. He didn't reply, and I didn't follow up. At work, I informed HR we would proceed with another candidate. No explanation beyond what was necessary. From a business perspective, the decision was straightforward. Avoid unnecessary complications. A few mutual acquaintances reached out over the next several days, not directly asking for details, but circling around them. I knew what that meant. Ethan had already shared his version. From what I gathered, it focused on one detail, that I had hidden my success. I didn't correct anyone. There's a certain kind of clarity that doesn't require defense. People who understand how I operate don't need explanations. And people who don't aren't part of my decision-making process. Life continued. Early mornings, site visits, numbers, meetings. Predictable, controlled, the same as it had been before, but with one difference. I paid closer attention to the small moments. The comments people make when they think something is insignificant. The assumptions they reveal without realizing it. Because those are never just about what they appear to be. They're about patterns. And patterns are consistent. Every day that week, I drove the same route home, in the same car. Nothing about it felt different. Not because it was insignificant, but because it had never been the problem to begin with. I'm not opposed to upgrading eventually, but if I do, it will be because I choose to, not because someone else uses it as a measure of who I am. What the situation clarified for me is simple. If respect increases the moment status becomes visible, it wasn't respect to begin with. It was conditional. And conditional things don't last. I don't think Ethan is uniquely terrible. That would be too easy. Too simple. He's just aligned with a different set of priorities. One where perception carries more weight than substance. Where value is assigned based on visible markers instead of consistent behavior. That mismatch surfaced in something small. A comment about a car. But it was never about the car. It was about how quickly someone recalibrates their treatment of you when new information appears. And whether that treatment was ever real in the first place. Since then, I've kept my personal life even more separate from my business. Not as a strategy, just as a natural extension of what I already understood. The filtering happens on its own. No announcements required. No explanations needed. The right people don't need context to show respect. And the wrong ones always reveal themselves eventually. Sometimes it just takes something as simple as a 2010 Honda.